Climate change is happening everywhere right now, but thankfully, some adults may have a solution. Back to the studio. Thank you, Zuri, for your courageous reporting. What a scary story. We are excited about the possible solution. So let's take our seats and get the ceremony started. Climate change is happening everywhere right now, but thankfully, some adults may have a solution. Back to the studio. Thank you, Zuri, for your courageous reporting. What a scary story. We are excited about the possible solution. So let's take our seats and get the ceremony started.
So the problem is real. Science backs it. In 1958, Dr. Dave Keeling of Scripps Institution of Oceanography set up an ultra-precise measurement device atop Mauna Loa in Hawaii to record carbon dioxide levels. His measurements of escalating CO2 levels became known as the Keeling curve. Today, we know that carbon dioxide in our oceans and atmosphere has risen continuously since the Industrial Revolution. These greenhouse gases have the ability to keep infrared radiation or heat circulating in our atmosphere. Without greenhouse gases, this planet would be as cold as space. Beach vacations would not be the same. So we want some greenhouse gases, but too much of a good thing can turn disastrous, resulting in our problem. So science proves it's happening, but do we have the science and motivation to stop it? That's where we come in. Our mission is to recognize the most promising ideas that either effectively reduce greenhouse gas emissions or increase carbon uptake. We reward leaders with needed financial resources and global visibility so that they can realize their visions. We are not pointing fingers. In fact, to the fossil fuel industry, oil, coal, natural gas, we thank you for creating a high-tech society and all of its advancements. But our knowledge has become greater. So it's time to change the game. It's time for energy evolution. It's time to get on board. If we're all willing to listen to one another, we'll realize that we have a lot of great ideas. So let's all join the party, work together, and rise to the challenge.
Can everyone please take a seat? We are beginning right now. Please take a seat. I hope you all got a chance to see the About Us Keeling Curve Prize. I know we were all talking, but please take a seat. Thank you.
So I have only one really important job, which is get everybody to be quiet. There we go. Find some place to sit. Because some really interesting people are going to come up and tell you very interesting things soon. Not me yet. Okay? So everybody here is going to pass the quiz. They're giving it a few minutes on the video we just had. You were all paying careful attention to the CO2 concentration figures, the velocity of the curve. Just checking. So what the video told you was really two things. Climate change is a big problem, and there's some really great things that people are doing about it. I'm going to expand on those and then bring up Jackie to have a conversation about the prize. So, on the first piece, climate change traditionally has felt to most easier anyway. Climate change has felt to most people like a very distant problem. It's something that is going to happen one day, maybe affect our children or our grandchildren or various other people we don't yet know or care very much about. That's been the dominant narrative around this issue for decades. That makes it a very suitable thing to discuss in Aspen, where people get together very often to discuss the great problems of the world and the proposed solutions that they might come up with in bucolic surroundings where the impacts of those things feel really distant. And what's interesting about climate change and Aspen is that both of those things are changing very fast. There was a meeting held in Switzerland about a month ago of about 25 of the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies. And every year at the beginning of that meeting, they do a little survey and they ask people what their top 5 problems are that they're worried about. And it's usually employment, training, taxes, Trump, pick your thing. This year, issue number 1 was climate risk. First time it ever even made the list, it was number 1. Now, why is that? What are people worried about? They're worried about their supply chains. They're worried about availability of resources. They're worried about a world in which instability becomes an everyday reality that you can't plan for. In Aspen, nobody needs to tell anybody in this room that because it snowed last week. I drove by an avalanche on my way here. I sent the picture to my kids. They were like, it's summer in Aspen. Why is there snow everywhere? And the answer is because the world's gone a little bit crazy. And nobody needs to ask a question anymore about whether that's really happening because it's happening really fast and it's happening all around us. It's no longer this distant problem that's going to happen somewhere else. It's something that's happening right now. And that instability is going to be disastrous if we don't do something about it. Now, what the video told you before is that this is a really simple problem. It's all about tons of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And as somebody said once, super simple analogy, it's like a bathtub. You pour things into it. The bathtub has a little drain. It's self-regulating until it's not because you put too much water in the bathtub. You fill up the bathtub. Bathtubs aren't very dangerous until they flood your house, and then you don't have a house anymore. That's what's happening to us. So what we need to figure out how to do is to slow down the velocity and the volume going into that bathtub. The problem is the bathtub is now getting quite full, so we have to slow it down much more quickly, and we have to slow it down much more radically than we ever would have had to do before. And that's where this prize comes in, and that's what makes this prize really interesting, is in order to change that speed and velocity, you only have to do 3 or 4 simple things. You have to change the global energy system, you have to change the global transportation system, and you have to change the global agricultural system. And while you're at it, you can do cement and steel and a few other things. And you have to do that really in about 15 years, maybe 20 at the outside. That is an overwhelming task that requires thousands and hundreds of thousands of changes that we're only getting our heads around now. And so in order to attack those hundreds of thousands of things, it's all about innovation and diffusion of innovation. How do you make a new thing? How do you make it then happen more quickly in more places as fast as you can? Look at the entrance here and pick any one of them. They're attacking a very discrete aspect of the problem, right? 3-wheeled vehicles in India need to become electric for people to breathe and for people to be able to deal with their transportation challenges in India. But it isn't just then in India, it's also Indonesia, it's also Thailand, it's also Vietnam. These are places where cars are much less interesting than three-wheeled vehicles. So something that seems quite small and discrete to us is actually a major component of the challenge. Now, it's only one of the major 100,000 components, but it's a big issue. Climate finance, same thing. How you do new kinds of agriculture, same thing. So what's exciting about this prize is that it's all about finding exciting new things that are happening, getting some kind of traction. Sometimes it's really big, sometimes it's really small, sometimes it's focused on a very local market, sometimes it's global, and highlighting them in ways that are going to push the diffusion of those new ideas much more quickly. So the real question is, how does that happen? To that, Jackie Francis, the executive director of the Keeling Curve Prize.
So first, I want to thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. And I want to do a quick, our high-tech things that we have going on here tonight, which are very exciting. If you download the HP Reveal app, you can actually focus it on these posters behind me, and a video will play, which is very high-tech. And the second high-tech thing we have going tonight is that we have these ballots, and if you can guess the 10 winners ahead of time, you get entered into a raffle to win a gift certificate from Le Chef's or Aspen Eclectic, donated by Carrie and Larkin Horn. So here are the paper ballots, but it's much easier if you actually go to text Keeling or text Keeling to, you guys ready? 57838 to vote for the winners and enter to win the gift certificate. So I just wanted to give you that information, and I'm going to give these paper ballots to Shannon, and she can pass them around if you'd like. Okay. Now, George didn't say his name, but this is George Polk. He is one of the Keeling Curve Prize judges, and he's actually in his second year of judging the prize.
So the simple question, Jackie, is why a prize? Here, have mine.
No, I think I got it. So I just did a program, a master's program in energy policy and climate, and I finished. I now have a master's, so it's exciting. And as I was doing the program, I was realizing that climate solutions are all over the world. They are very interesting. They are high tech. They are low tech. They are popping up everywhere. And there are so many organizations out there. I have worked in nonprofit, and I know how difficult it is to find money for what you're doing. I know how difficult it is to go through the grant process. And so I thought, what would be a great thing that would actually really motivate people and get people excited in a competitive spirit? And I came up with the idea of a prize and put together the pieces and the sort of understanding of how it would work. The current president pulled out of the Paris Treaty, and a very good friend of mine said, send me a proposal. And I'd like to thank Mike Klein, who is sitting right over there. He accepted my proposal, and we went forward to create something that we thought would be a really great thing to amplify and motivate people in climate solutions. And the prize was something that did that and is doing that right now.
Okay, and so I guess to ask my Aspen question, why here and where else?
Well, I'm from here. And our team is actually international. We don't actually ask them to travel at all. We have a judge who's from Sri Lanka, and she lives in the UK. We have a judge who is from Ethiopia, and he lives there and represents the least developed countries in the UNFCCC. We have analysts from all over the place, and we have advisory council members from all over the place and judges from all over the place. So the Aspen question is because um, that's where Mike and I met, and we are just based here. But the prize being international is because it is a international atmosphere and an international problem, and the atmosphere is suffering from the tragedy of the commons. So is the ocean. So even though the prize is located here, that's not where I expect it to actually have the biggest impacts.
And then the really unfair question: what was the most fun thing about the prize last year?
You know, I would love my analyst team to actually raise their hand for a second, because for me, that's my favorite thing is working with the analyst team, coming up with the scoring system, how we're going to judge the applications. So when the applications come in the door and we start reading them and talking about what they're doing and scoring what they're doing and seeing these solutions happening all over the world, not only does it give me an inspiration and just fires me up, I find that I read them and I say to myself, God, I want to fund that one. Oh, yeah, I want to fund that one too. Oh, and can we just fund that one too? And every single one of them inspires me and touches my heart.
And how do you spread the impact beyond here? And after that, I think we move to the prizes, no?
So I'm seeing the prize as being, it has a ripple effect. It gets people on board. There is a social aspect to it that's really exciting. People get their act together when they have to apply for the prize, which helps them kind of look at their own projects and say, okay, this is something that we need to do and improve on in order to even apply for this prize. So that's one thing that helps. And then another thing that helps is it gets them really fired up and motivated and connected when they start looking at the finalists. And I'm hoping right now that a lot of the finalists are actually watching and feeling the enthusiasm of being a part of a movement. And the one other thing that I want to mention is that there is this philosophy about being a first follower. And a first follower is the person that points to something that's happening and tells everybody else, this is really exciting. I want you guys to all look at this and get exciting and come follow me down this path. And that's what I feel like we're trying to do with the Keeling Curve Prize.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'd like to bring up one of my senior analysts, which is Avon. And Avon is going to tell you a little about himself and introduce the first category.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Aben Satchery-Malloy, and I'm a senior analyst with the Keeling Curve Prize. This is my second year with the prize. And when I'm not working with the prize, I'm a PhD student rapidly trying to finish my dissertation, which should happen in the next 3 months or so. I always take time to knock on wood at this point. You'll hear from several of the analysts tonight introducing some of the categories. One of my favorite parts really of being part of the prize was, as I'm looking forward to the next 3 months and probably being unemployed and looking for work, it's a really nice opportunity to check in with all the incredible, ambitious work that's being done to accelerate ambition on global warming mitigation. So that for me was a really great part of the process. And some of the most innovative solutions, in my personal opinion, are those in the category which I'm introducing, which are the finalists in the category of carbon capture and utilization. So I'll adjust you to the videos to watch the introduction for these finalists.
The finalists for carbon capture and utilization are advancing strategies for capturing heat-trapping gases from the air or oceans. They bring these strategies to the forefront of the marketplace and provide methods for verification. Bluefield Technologies provides cost-effective, sensitive, and precise monitoring of methane leaks using microsatellite hosted sensors and artificial intelligence. Opus 12 is developing a device to recycle carbon dioxide into cost-competitive fuels and chemicals via electrochemical conversion of carbon dioxide. Regen Network uses blockchain technology to track and monitor soil health from sensors, along with remote sensing to create a data marketplace for governments and other institutions. Wild Coast aims to secure a resilient coastline and help protect communities, economies, and ecosystems from climate change impacts in the Gulf of California. These finalists are actively developing, improving, implementing, and creating solutions to restore the natural carbon cycle.
Now I'd like to bring up my friend and the daughter of Charles David Keeling, Emily Keeling Takahashi.
Hello, everyone. I'm so honored and delighted to be amongst so many people who are creative and dedicated to doing something about our climate emergency. So I just want to start out by acknowledging the talent and the power in the room, and how honored I feel to be here with all of you, and visiting with my husband David down from Boulder. So this prize could have been given any number of different names, obviously, but the fact that it was named after the work of my father, Charles David Keeling, makes it feel very personal to me, even though I'm not really involved in it. But I hear the name of it, and it's sort of, you know, when you hear your name, you just automatically have some kind of vitality about it. So, but for me, it's an example of how human beings work best, which is namely that somebody, my father, helped to identify a problem. Somebody, like Jacqueline, said, how can I help? What can we do? And then we have a lot of people who say, well, let's try this, or let's try this. And that's what's happening here. And so that's human beings collaborating together to do good work. So so my father passed away in 2005, so he doesn't get to see how all of this plays out. So I feel it's very poignant for me to kind of be the stand-in and feel like I'm a little bit of a conduit for the work that he did, and then how things are moving into the future. And when he died, the family we had to come up with what we were going to put on his headstone, and we came up with 5 words. And it might feel like, well, your whole life and you were just reduced to 5 words, but these 5 words do pack a punch. And the 5 words are music, mountains, science, laughter, and love. And I thought that, oh, I'd like to just say a little bit of something about all 5 of them so you could get a sense of who my dad was. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to talk about one. Besides, there hopefully will be other years, and we have to hold some stories back for for the future. So my mother was really keen that the word science not be the first word on the headstone, not even the second word. It's the middle word of 5. So it has a central place, which is appropriate, and because it really, it's what he devoted his life and his work to. But the other words around it were really key to the success of what he was able to do in the one word science. And we're going to see a very short video, and you focus on what the video is talking about, but also tune your ear to the soundtrack, because it's some piano music that my father, it's him playing, and my brother recorded it some years back, and we're glad that he did, because now we have something still of his music. Music was a passion for him at a very young age. He when he was a teenager, he was known to do nerdy things like transcribe entire Beethoven symphonies so that he could play them on the piano. And then the story goes that when he was 16, he had to make a decision about whether to be a concert pianist or a scientist. And he deliberated about it, and he came up with the fact that science probably made the better vocation and music the avocation. And it's curious maybe to think about, well, what if he had made the decision the other way around? The Keeling Curve Prize would have a different name. I would not be speaking here. But as it turns out, the decision was made the way it was, and things rolled the way they did. So here we all are. It turns out that science and music often come together. And we had a lot of dinner guests when I was a child, and there would be fairly intense conversations going on at the dinner table about the carbon cycle or this, that, or the other, and I would usually tune them out. But after dinner and the chairs got pushed away, often one of the guests would have brought a violin or a French horn or a cello, and the evening would proceed into the living room, and music would be played. And I fell asleep many, many times to the sound of my dad playing Schubert or Bach. And he had a tremendous amount of stress in his life. A lot of he had to worry about where his funding was going to come from, and a lot of people were depending on him, including a family of 5 children. But the fact that he actually knew how to sometimes put all that down and go to the piano and renew his soul in a way that restored him. And so I think when I look at the Keeling curve, yes, it's scientific data, but I know that embedded in all those little pieces of data are also the notes of Beethoven and Bach and all the music my dad played and listened to and shared with friends over the years. So just to conclude, just thinking about how saving the world, we have to remember we're saving our souls, and that as we save our souls, then we can save the world too. So anyway, I just want to congratulate the tremendous work that's been done, and on behalf of the Keeling family, how honored we are that this is happening, and congratulations to the finalists and to the winners of the Keeling Curve Prize. Thank you.
I wanted to make sure I could do something that had to do with constructing instruments. And so I built a device to make the measurements of the concentration of carbon dioxide. It was called a manometer. So with this precise manometer and the use of liquid nitrogen, I was able to make these measurements quite accurately. A glass vessel about this big around, and it had a closure at the top, so I could actually pump the air out of it and make it a vacuum. And then all I had to do was to turn a little valve on the top, stopcock it's called, and the air would go and come down in the flask. And then you'd close the stopcock, and you could send it anywhere. I was about 26 years old when this started. I had this opportunity to command the samples be taken in distant places, including the South Pole, ice flows in the Arctic Ocean, also tropical locations, and they all came back with nearly the same result. In fact, it was so much the same result that when they were published in a bulletin of the International Geophysical Year, somebody said it must be that the instrument I was using was stuck, and it was just making the same measurement all the time. But of course, we checked that out, and it wasn't true. And So we went ahead and kept making these measurements.
So thank you, Emily and the Keeling family, for letting us use their fabulous data set and their fabulous name. I would like to introduce another one of my senior analysts, Ruth Metzel, who's our Central American um, diplomat.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out today. Yes, my name is Ruth Metzel. I'm a senior research analyst, and when I'm not working on the Keeling Curve Prize, I direct a nonprofit in Panama that works on tropical dry forest restoration with landowners and cattle ranchers in the area. And so most of the work I do in the day-to-day is out in the field, wearing rubber boots, planting trees, actually similar to carbon capture and utilization in the land use arena. So for me, going back to what Emily said, it's always a process of restoring my soul to review all of the applicants to the Keeling Curve Prize and just see the amazing community of people working on these issues worldwide and in such different areas and with such different expertise that I myself hold. So for me, it is a great honor to introduce this coming category of energy access, precisely because these are people working on such amazing issues and something very different than what I do in my day-to-day.
Finalists in the energy access category are leading the way in providing zero emissions energy access worldwide, especially in areas that currently experience energy poverty. 10 Power fosters regenerative international development through sustainable innovation, developing and financing renewable energy projects in markets lacking access to energy. African Clean Energy produces the ACE-1 solar biomass energy system, an advanced cook stove which reduces indoor air pollution to negligible levels while providing solar energy. Urja Development Solutions Ltd creates solar water pumping irrigation systems for last-mile rural markets, replacing diesel as fuel. Solar Sister delivers trusted, sustainable energy access and builds climate resilience in remote and underserved communities. These finalists are improving energy access for less developed communities in swift and stable ways, especially those vulnerable to increased coal and fossil fuel use.
Hello?
We'll do that. Okay. I'm Susan Joy Hassel. I'm the Director of Climate Communication. I've been working in the communication of climate change for 30 years, and it's a very exciting time in climate change. The work that I do is integrating and synthesizing across all the scientific disciplines that have something to do with climate change, and then communicating that in plain language so that anybody can understand it. Seriously, from third graders all the way down to members of Congress. You are paying attention, just a little bit. Okay, so I just want to make sure. So I was the writer on the first 3 national climate assessments. I trained scientists in how to communicate more clearly and effectively. Right now, I'm doing a lot of work with journalists, teaching them how to incorporate climate change into the work that they're doing in producing stories on every topic, not just a weather story, not just an environmental story, but a story about our health and our well-being and our economy and so forth. So, I'm always looking for interesting and creative ways to communicate about climate change. I wrote an HBO documentary called Too Hot Not to Handle. If you notice the pin I'm wearing, it's the global temperature record from 1880 to the present. And so you can see each year is one stripe, and it goes from much colder to much hotter. And so it's just another communication device. It's another way to start conversations and to help to communicate with people about this most urgent issue of our time. So when Jackie approached me and asked me to be on the advisory council for the Keeling Curve Prize, I was very excited about it. One reason I'm excited about this prize is because, when we're looking for solutions to climate change, to this great challenge, there is no silver bullet, but there is silver buckshot. And the Keeling Curve Prize is all about nurturing those best ideas. And that's why I'm really excited about it. And now I'm going to turn it over to my fellow council member to introduce himself and tell you a little bit about his background.
There we go. I think, yeah, that's working. Hi, my name is David Bookbinder. I am currently the chief counsel for the Niskanen Center in Washington, D.C., which is a small think tank that one of its specializations is in federal climate policy, mostly carbon tax work. And interestingly enough, it's a group dedicated to talking to and working with the Republicans in Congress. We don't need to work the Democrats. We have them. We have to work the Republicans. And so we have people working day in and day out with staffers, with members, with committee staff, et cetera. And so I'm delighted to be able to help with those efforts. And hopefully, if we're ever going to get federal climate policy, we're going to get it with a bipartisan consensus in Washington. And that's what we're hoping to achieve. So that's what I do. I'm a wonk on this. I spent 10 years as Sierra Club's chief climate counsel, and I've been doing this stuff for a long, long time. And I'm delighted to be part of the Keeling Curve Prize because it is important. It is critically important as I see all the interesting and smart and creative ideas out there. It makes me feel better because most of the time I'm beating my head against a wall. And to have people dedicating their brains and efforts to find climate solutions in every conceivable way, it's wonderful for me to see. And the only other thing I want to say is Jackie Francis has made this all possible. And for no other reasons, I would like everyone to give her a big round of applause.
Hello, everyone. It's a privilege to be here. My name is Catherine Foster. I'm actually representing Project Drawdown for this afternoon. I'm taking the place of Chad Frischman, who's having a lovely time in Denmark this week. Project Drawdown is a nonprofit that maps, models, and assesses about 80 climate solutions. So we're not looking just at environmental impact, finance as well. We are an international group, so we have over 80 research fellows from around the world that have contributed to this research. Many of the analysts, if not all, are actually alumni of ours. And we have been an advisor of the Keeling Curve Prize since its inception, and it's an honor to continue such work. Project Drawdown is a very small staff. There are only 6 of us, actually, in the team itself. And our focus really is research, communications, and education. The implementation needs to be taken on by other people. So that's why the Keeling Curve Prize is so impactful and important to this type of work. We are introducing some new subject areas for our research. We are looking into oceans. That was not a part of the book that was published a few years ago. So any questions about that would be helpful as well. Thank you so much.
We don't want any feedback, climate feedback, sorry. Okay, so we're going to take a few questions. There are some questions on cards around the room if you want to ask any of those, or if you want to ask any question, burning question you have about climate change, science, or solutions, or what you can do, or any of that kind of stuff. We'll take a few questions, and otherwise we'll just move right on. Yes.
Most likely. So we're still working on the initial analysis. Oh, apologies. The question was about whether or not the oceans research would impact the findings that were produced. The answer is most likely. The ocean plays a significant part in the carbon system, and its integration effects will affect all the sectors that are integrated with that. We're looking at things like the carbon sink or algae farms. Coastal wetlands was a project initially that looked into that too. And it's based off of the model itself is based off of the land use model. So basing it on specific areas of the oceans and where those solutions would take place.
Steve.
I was at the awards last year over in the old Aspen Times building. This is a great space, much bigger space.
Who went off?
Button on the side. I think Jackie actually would be the best person to answer that.
Yes, we have been following the winners. I actually have a spreadsheet as to some of the things that they're accomplishing, and Paul and I have been putting some of the stuff online. We've So yeah, that's something we're going to continue to do going forward too, is tell the stories of the winners, the finalists, the applicants, and really pay attention to what's going on to them after they win and how the Keeling Curve Prize has impacted their work and their lives.
Hey, it's working for me. My interest is, how do we get a culture of climate action and personal responsibility for energy to get out into the whole population, like we did at the beginning of World War II, where we got a culture of everybody being efficient for the war effort?
So this is a wonderful question, and the World War II analogy is actually quite a good one because we're facing that kind of threat, but actually an even larger one. So we need to mobilize.
Sorry about that, you guys.
I think the first thing we need is good political leadership, right? So this is not a problem we can solve voluntarily with individual actions, one person at a time. We need to change the economy, right? So we need much, much better political leadership, and hopefully we're going to get that soon. But even regardless of what's happening at the national level, there's still a lot going on at the state and local level and in communities all over the country. So we are starting to see that. But I think a big piece of this is that people need to understand the urgency of this issue and the choice that we face. I think one reason that we don't see that is because people are not talking about it and they're not hearing about it enough in the media. So that's why when people ask me what they can do, I say, first of all, vote for people who are going to take this issue seriously and do something about it economy-wide. Second of all, talk about it. Talk to your friends and your neighbors, and don't just let the silence on this issue continue. And what I do with journalists is to get them to integrate this into their work. We've got 700 weathercasters nationwide who are integrating climate change information into their weathercasts, because these are trusted voices that people know and believe. And the only scientist that many people know is this weathercaster that they see on television. So my feeling is that if we start hearing about it more in the media and we talk about it more and we get better leadership, that we can really move this thing forward. We know what to do. We know what the policies are that work. We have the technologies. Solar, there's just a solar contract signed at 2 cents a kilowatt hour. It is now the cheapest. Wind and solar are cheaper than even operating costs of existing coal and gas plants. So this is something we can do. We just need to get on it. And I think this communication piece is a very important part of the mobilization that you asked about.
Thank you, Susan. We have time for one more question.
Thank you so much for being. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Jackie, for organizing this and all your hard work. The Bureau of Land Management just announced a revised management plan for the North Fork of Colorado, extending pretty much from the top of the Thompson Divide all the way to San Miguel County. And they basically have said drill everywhere, drill all the time. And this is very counter to the input they've received from the public and all the farm to table work that goes on in the North Fork Valley. We were fortunate to have the support of our community and a great many donors in our fight against the Thompson Divide illegally issued leases. I would just like to encourage and ask you, how should we respond to help our neighbors in the North Fork and keep that natural gas in the ground? Thank you.
You clearly know better than I do how to organize people, make their voices heard, make a stink, make a ruckus, and vote appropriately. Right now, unfortunately, it shifts from that to the courts. When BLM makes a decision, the Bureau of Land Management, the lawyers have to go to court and sue the agency. There's two pieces of good news I want to say about litigation, which I did for and still do on the climate front. One is the Trump administration has been losing case after case on environmental issues because they simply decided, without public input, without following any of the rules about how you actually make regulations and make law, just arbitrarily said, we're going to change that and that and that and that. And the courts have struck them down one after the other, after the other, after the other, which has been great. The second thing is the courts are becoming more and more aware of climate problems. And it's no longer this exotic thing. It's something that individual judges now understand is a big problem. Just 2 weeks ago, there was an interesting sign from the Iowa Supreme Court, and they had a case involving the Dakota Access Pipeline and landowners and whether the land could be taken for the Dakota Access. One of the things they said was, we need a national climate policy. We understand that. Maybe what this country needs is a carbon tax. It's not our job to decide that now. And then they went on to their analysis. But in other words, the Iowa Supreme Court, in the middle of a decision about landowner rights, simply went off on a little bit of discussion as to the climate problem. We need a national solution. And hey, we think a carbon tax would be a good idea. When you get that reaction out of like the Iowa Supreme Court, you're making progress with the judges. So that's a bit of good news out there.
Thank you.
If you get a chance after the presentation, corner these guys and ask them more questions. They're very smart, along with the rest of our advisory council. I am very, very honored to be associated with such amazing people. And speaking of amazing people, I'd like to introduce my third senior analyst, Karthik Makavelli. Come on up, Karthik.
Hi all, so glad to be a senior analyst on KCP. Apart from that, I'm working on bridging gaps between machine learning or artificial intelligence and climate science. George Pogue spoke about two things. One is that climate science is a fairly distant problem. So we're changing that by bringing the future closer, by allowing people to visualize future impacts of climate change using artificial intelligence techniques. And the other point he spoke about was climate risk. So I have a startup company registered, which is working on this problem to help direct investments, taking into account extreme climate phenomena. So to speak about the category, climate finance, we know that at this point in time, the incentives are misaligned. So for every $10 that a fossil fuel company can perhaps make and provides to the society, $4 of that is probably like, say, harm to the society. But what they're paying is, what they're getting out of it is still $10, so as opposed to $6. So adding up all of this is like $5.3 trillion per year of false incentives as subsidies, which they're getting. So how do you change this balance? And I think the climate finance category is something where some of the misalignment can be adjusted to help with renewables and other forms of energy and other solutions. So thank you.
The finalists for climate finance are creating and deploying financial mechanisms that consider ecological, atmospheric, and human wellness on equal footing with economic ideals. California Clean Energy Fund and New Energy Nexus have formed a qualified Clean Energy Opportunities Zone Fund. This allows developers to improve economics at the project level and deploy resources to higher risk projects. Clean Energy Works accelerates investments in distributed clean energy through inclusive investments, or pay-as-you-save. Ma Anshan Rural Commercial Bank is the first green commercial bank in China. Their aim is to establish a credible model of green transformation in small and medium-sized banks in China and around the globe. As a software company, Odyssey Energy Solutions facilitates the financing and development of off-grid distributed energy projects and addresses rural energy poverty in developing countries. These projects are designed to counterbalance or replace financial strategies that fail to account for sustainability and equity.
So I'd just like to introduce Zach. He's joined us this year as an analyst and was also a former Brown colleague.
Everyone, so I'm Zach Accardi. I work at the Natural Resources Defense Council on a project called the American Cities Climate Challenge. My job is to support cities who are interested in implementing ambitious transportation policies and projects. And I'm really happy to be involved and contributing in a small way to the Keeling Curve Prize this year. And my job now is to introduce a category that's new this year to the Keeling Curve Prize, social and cultural impacts. And there was a great question earlier around how we kind of expand awareness of this. And the finalists in this category do that in a number of different ways, both in terms of giving people better tools to understand their individual action, giving us new practices to organize, giving businesses new ways to think about climate change in the context of their work. So with that, we'll go into the video and give you more information about these great finalists.
Finalists in the social and cultural impacts category are changing the way people think about and act on human impact on this planet. What does it take, socially and culturally, to develop beyond fossil fuels? These projects are answering that question. Mothers of Invention is a podcast supporting new voices and narratives in the climate debate by discussing climate solutions through a climate justice and gender lens. The podcast is co-hosted by Mary Robinson, former president of Ireland. EcoChallenge.org is a digital platform to inspire, educate, and activate behavior change and emissions reduction with targeted campaigns. Providing companies with a clearly defined pathway to future-proof growth is the goal of science-based targets. They accomplish this by specifying how much and how quickly companies need to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. The World Council of Churches is a partnership supporting youths engaged in climate justice through church-run schools, Sunday schools, and summer camps. By driving cultural awareness, these projects encourage individuals, communities, businesses, and governments to promote high regard for the quality of life for all, both now and in the future.
So now coming up, we've got two of the Keeling Curve Prizes judges for this year. And Keeling Curve Prize, Jackie started to introduce a few of the folks at the beginning of this event who come from all over the world, who have expertise in their fields who are leaders in their fields nationally and internationally. So we're very happy to have George Polk coming back to the stage, one of this year's judges, and Robin Newmark.
We'll play musical microphone with one. So we had this fascinating experience of getting 20 great, well-filtered things to choose between. How did you do it?
Let's rewind. The challenge is great. Success, as you've heard today, is going to require change from technical to policy to institutional to societal. And the solution space is just as great. So having criteria that allows us to evaluate the impact of a technology in its innovation space, a finance option in its innovation space, energy access, transportation options. That was really the challenge. And I think that thinking about the categories of what is innovation, how big an impact can this applicant, this amazing group of finalists have in that space, and what are the likelihood of success based on how far they've gotten. Some of these are pretty early stage. That was kind of the challenge, and that allowed us to kind of, at least allowed me to look at very, very different solutions and have a kind of a fair ranking, because they're all looking at how far can the solution move given the challenge that we have.
So Mark Harvey, who's in the corner's brother, Hal Harvey, is one of the great thinkers around climate change and what you do about it. And Hal's sort of signature phrase was follow the tons. It's back to the bathtub before, right? You really care about how much water is going in the bathtub. Just focus on the things that pass a lot of water, that generate a lot of tons. But it's not quite so simple, because it's hard. It's easy to see that a coal plant emits tons, but it's harder to see that social movements emit tons, or that failure to do things emit tons. And so the question of how you choose something that has the maximum impact is a really interesting challenge as a judge, right? Because, for example, energy access in Africa is never going to generate meaningful tons, but it generates tremendous social impact. How did you weigh those things when you were looking at the various applicants?
There's another piece, which is the co-benefits. So you can get gigatons, at power plants. But as you said, rural Africa, Asia, that's not going to make the difference. So what are for me, an innovation that allows economic development and social benefit, those co-benefits, less pollution, cook stoves that aren't going to have a public health issue in the family, freeing up women that don't have to move water, things like that. Those co-benefits are really important. Can we help a solution that allows them to skip the development that we've learned is not that great, but still help everyone rise up? It's not fair to say, oh, the developed countries, we did our carbon, you can develop too, but don't emit any more carbon. Well, let's figure out a way that they can have the same development and the same social benefit, but maybe skip the mistakes that we made. So to me, it was trying to evaluate the overall solution in that space and how fast and what an impact it's going to have across the whole spectrum. Sure, there's some technologies and some winners last year that are on the big scale, but if you look, there's some in that small last mile kind of very local scale, but they have the potential to really have an impact.
And so maybe to double down on that same theme, the other challenge is to misappropriate a word maybe. There's some things that are really sexy, and then there's some things that are just dull and important. How, when you were looking at things, did you balance between the dull and important and the racier and sexier?
Impact. How do you define impact? And how do you find innovation? Innovation in the policy spectrum looks a lot different than I'm a technologist by background. You understand what an innovation is in a new kind of mechanical thing or a new algorithm. So how big an impact is that really going to have? And that helped me guide me in my rankings. We have a lot of judges. You've seen all the judges. I don't know who the winners are. I can tell you what my ranking were, but I imagine this morning the staff was talking about the very different. I don't think we all were unanimous in our rankings of the various applicants, and they were all amazing, I will just say.
So I'm going to confess that I was much less systematic. I'm super impressed by how you went about it. It was a very easy task in a way, because the analysts did a really great job. I mean, this is a difficult thing. Last year, it was a real challenge. There were applicants from kind of all over the place. This year, what was exciting about being a judge is that there was no sense that there was a wrong choice. And so what was interesting to me was you could be much more professional and systematic, as it sounded like you were, or you could actually just say, this one feels like it's going to be kind of important. And you could make choices between things based on that, because what you felt when you read all of them is that all of them had a place and all of them needed to scale. And that was super exciting for me. I really enjoyed that. I think we have to thank Mike, thank Jackie for having created a forum for all of these really interesting ideas to bubble up into a much broader public awareness. And so I'm very pleased you did the hard work you did. For me, it was kind of a, wow, that feels like it really hits. And one of the things that was interesting was, this idea that Jackie had of, everybody fill out their guess. What actually I would hope that everyone would do, because you probably haven't been reading summaries of all the companies while you were eating and drinking, take home or go look up the summaries of the companies and vote for one at home and see which one you really think hits for you. It'd be super interesting to see how that touches you. I'd love to ask you, if you had to vote for one, what you'd choose, but I don't think I'm allowed to. So I won't say that.
I have a question for you. We had a group in each category. You've seen them all. Did you have any ties in your mind?
No, I mean, I kind of think they all tied in a way, because if you look at one category like Pick Finance, right? So you've got a Chinese local bank, right? And that's super interesting. Then you have a California state-funded program, right? I mean, these things are so different, and it goes to what I was saying earlier. What's so interesting, problematic, but intellectually super interesting about this problem is that there are so many different ways we have to attack it. There's no one right answer. And so for me, I really enjoyed the fact that all of them were at the table, and frankly, kind of felt like all of them should win.
So I think the thing that made it really exciting to me, I'm a technologist. I just retired from NREL. And I would tell people, there are these amazing solutions out here. I would say the things that I've learned. And it's up to all of us and those of us listening on video streaming to go and talk about this, because there are so many great ideas and they're not all going to win. I know everyone's a winner, but they really are. So it's up to us to keep that going.
I guess I would say one last thing in closing. So what I've done for the last, I don't know what it is, 5, 8 years or something, my involvement in climate change has been to be an investor. And so I've moved capital into lots of different segments of the climate world and through actually a number of different vehicles. And that's been super exciting, very interesting, quite hard. But compared to this, also in some ways quite frustrating, because if you're a steward of somebody else's capital, your risk appetite, even if you're trying to be at the edge, is still very limited. Because you can't lose the money, right? You can argue about how much you need to make, but if you lose it, it's a problem. Whereas here, one of the interesting things when you look across, when people are experimenting with different things, at very different stages, that experimentation needs to somehow also be supported until it can get to the point where, somebody like me who can't lose the money can be helpful. And so looking at how different people are going about this and the sacrifices and the efforts that they make to get their thing out into the real world was, for me, really interesting. And I think with that, our time is up.
I think I've got it working. Hang on to that one, George. Okay, so thank you, you guys. Very thoughtful conversation, and thank you for being our judges. And I want to take 1 minute to just really thank all of you for being here. Thank all of the people who have applied, which I know there's a couple in this room. Francis back there, I see, and I think Ed and Vardy's here, and a couple other people that are local who applied for the prize. And I just want to thank you, and I want to thank all the finalists. And with that, I'm going to introduce two of our analysts that can't be here. Mamta is in India, and Jen Han, who is our, she's off working in the real world. So we've got a little video, and they're going to introduce our last category, transportation. So here they are.
Hi everyone, my name is Jen Han, one of the KCB analysts this year. I got a PhD in ecology from Cornell University, worked for several nonprofits, including Project Drawdown and American Carbon Registry. Now I work for a small mission-driven consulting firm in Seattle. It's my great honor to be part of the Keeling Prize analyst team and get to know so many exciting and innovative climate solutions. Congratulations to all the finalists, and I wish you a wonderful time in Aspen. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Mamta Mehra and I'm working as a senior fellow with Project Drawdown. Project Drawdown is a research and communication organization that assesses, maps, models, and describes the potential of a solution to achieve drawdown. As part of my engagement with Keeling Prize, I got an opportunity to know a lot about many drawdown solutions that is happening around the world in different capacities across different sectors. I'm honored to introduce the transportation sector finalists with all of you. My best wishes to all of them. Let's have the video clip, and thank you everyone. Have a nice award ceremony. Take care. Bye-bye.
Reimagining and inventing a cleaner, more efficient travel experience is the goal for finalists in the transportation category. Bridges to Prosperity provides economic mobility to rural communities in developing countries, while reducing the need for vehicle infrastructure by building pedestrian footbridges for crucial last-mile connections. Green gas embeds voluntary carbon offsets into gas purchases in order to raise money for verified carbon reduction and sequestration programs. Jetty uses technology to establish and enforce improved reliability, safety, and security in mass transit systems. This mitigates congestion and waste caused by single-passenger transit options. Using technology and finance to decarbonize the rickshaw market, Three Wheels United puts the auto rickshaw drivers first by empowering them to own and operate electric vehicles and to integrate with public transport. Whether confronting mass transit scheduling or pioneering efficient vehicles and their manufacture, these projects are reinventing a new standard for zero-emissions transportation.
So our friend Bill McKibben from 350.org wanted to actually be our MC tonight, but he had to go to a wedding. So we have a little message from Bill McKibben.
Hello, friends. My name is Bill McKibben. I'm the founder of 350.org, and I wrote the first book for a general audience about climate change, The End of Nature. I so wish I was there with you today because this is a really powerful occasion one of the things I try to do is bring people together in effective collaborative action. And I think that everyone, scientists and non-scientists alike, need to understand about what's happening in our climate and how they can powerfully participate in the solution. The Keeling curve is the most important statistic on the planet, the instrument that maintains our CO2 records, the most important scientific instrument in human history. But it was built at a time when C.D. Keeling expected that once the truth was revealed, the world would act on it. Science counted on the public to demand action. Science provided the message. The rest of us provided the messengers. Times have changed. We need people really standing up now. Each of the 20 finalists is a winner in that they have tried to answer the question of what to do with the information that C.D. Keeling bequeathed us. The vision of rounding off that ever-rising curve and beginning an incline down to 350 or below, that's what's urgently calling us forward. Really, the over 100 applicants are worthy of recognition for trying to do the things that we all need to be doing. Their work to draw the warming down is the work of our time. And so I wish to heck I could be there with you. I'm extremely excited to find out about the winners. Let's bring up the KCP analysts and find out who won.
So I'm going to bring up the analysts behind me right now. I also want to thank Bill and Adam Lewis, who I think are still here tonight. And I want to mention Noah Davis, Solar Rollers, who is another applicant that I appreciate him being here. I want to thank the Baum Foundation. I especially want to thank Mike Klein, who left. And let's get to it. We're going to start with Avon in the carbon capture and utilization category.
I need some sort of drum roll or something. All right. So here I have the two winners of the 2019 Keeling Curve Prize in carbon capture and utilization. The winners are Wild Coast and Opus 12.
Next, we'll have the winners for the energy access category, and they are Solar Sister and African Clean Energy. Congratulations.
So next we have climate finance. So the winner is California Clean Energy Fund and New Energy Nexus, as well as Clean Energy Works.
So then we've got social and cultural impacts. So we've got first the Science-Based Targets Initiative, SBTI. And the World Council of Churches.
And our last category tonight is transportation. I hope you guys did fill out a vote and voted for them, so maybe you know whether or not you're going to win. And after I announce, I'd like to have anybody who actually applied for the prize and then anybody who was a finalist or a winner, I'd like you to come up to the stage. So in the transportation category, our winners were Jetty and Three Wheels United. Congratulations. Now I know we have a couple people here. Wild Coast, why don't you come on up to the to the stage. And I think maybe somebody from Opus 12 might be here tonight, possibly. Nope, she didn't make it, but she's here in town. So anyway, congratulate our winners. And all the applicants, please introduce yourselves to people around the table. And now I'd like to say thank you so much for coming and enjoy some cocktails and appetizers and come talk to some of these people and congratulate our winner who's here to accept his award. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Fantastic. Congratulations.